researchers are still trying to make sense of the rocky extraterrestrial visitor to our night sky. You may not be aware, but our lovely moon has two faces. If not, we are immediately informing you. We can only see one side, while the other is concealed from view. The intriguing part, though, is that these two sides or faces are completely distinct from one another. The explanation for this was the world's most well-known mystery, and it was never found. However, astrophysicists at NASA have now uncovered the answer to this riddle. However, this only scratches the surface. Recently, NASA revealed that they are also keeping an eye on a massive, rapidly growing anomaly on the moon. What possibly was that? Could the moon pose a threat to us here on Earth? Let's find out. Scientists reiterate that the moon still has many mysteries that need to be investigated as NASA gears up to send men to the moon once more by the year 2024, and amid conflicting messages from the US administration over the impending mission. Humans have spent countless ages gazing up at the moon, which is approximately 250,000 kilometers beyond Earth's atmosphere that supports life. Our ancestors perceived hazy shapes that reminded them of something familiar in its lamp-like countenance, and they concocted magical tales to explain these peculiar traits. But just 60 years ago, this timeless affection for our nearest celestial neighbor was forever altered when the Soviets' Luna 3 probe photographed the moon's previously unseen far side for the very first time. In Eastern traditions, a jade rabbit was imagined pounding the elixir of life, conjuring medicines, or mixing ingredients for rice cakes, while in the modern West, children are still lulled to sleep by the notion of a man in the moon. This other aspect of the moon, which is sometimes incorrectly called the dark side, a term for madness made popular by the music band Pink Floyd, results from its synchronous interaction with Earth. Imagine Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong directing the Apollo 11 lunar module to the moon's surface after a 3-day voyage from Earth. The deep dark craters, the boulders dotting the alien landscape, and the fine dust that surrounds the spaceship as it ignites its descent engine for landing are all things they comment on as they get closer to their landing place in the Sea of Tranquility. However, when the lander touches down, Aldrin and Armstrong observe an oddity. The surrounding area seems to be rising, but hold on, the spaceship is actually sinking. As a stone dropped in quicksand, the 15-ton lunar module is being engulfed by the thick coating of moon dust. The two astronauts understand they won't be able to exit the spacecraft, but their overworked minds hardly register their dismay. They might never leave the moon if they can't figure out how to get the lander out of the way. While the Apollo program was taking shape in the early 1960s, the subject of whether the moon would swallow a lander was still up for discussion. Today, we know that the moon merely has a veneer of dust covering its essentially hard crust. The worry wasn't allayed until NASA sent a number of robotic missions to the moon's surface before the Great Leap of Humans. Although lunar research wasn't the main objective of the Apollo 11 mission, the 6 crewed missions that came after it and the robotic missions that came before it greatly increased our knowledge of the moon. Scientists were able to estimate the moon's age, composition, and formation thanks to the more than 2,000 moon rocks that the Apollo astronauts brought back. After the final person left the moon in 1972 and the last Soviet lander left shortly after, there were still fundamental problems that were unresolved for decades despite Apollo's significant scientific impact. The next time a robot touched the moon's surface was in 1993, when Japan's Haiten lunar probe was purposefully deorbited. A planetary scientist at the University of Colorado Boulder. According to Hain, the obvious idea holds that the water ice was deposited by encounters with asteroids and comets, where it melted and finally found its way to the poles. It's also likely that due to changes in surface temperature, ionized hydrogen from solar winds interacts with oxygen trapped in the regolith and finally escapes as vaporized water. Last but not least, it's conceivable that water existed in the material that initially created the moon and was pushed to the surface by volcanic eruptions. It's possible that all 3 processes were active, in which case it becomes unclear how much water was produced by each method. As a result, Hain explains, we have some theories about how water got there, but the competing hypotheses have not really been tested yet. Nevertheless, there are some encouraging preliminary statistics. In order to strike the lunar surface at the South Pole, NASA launched the Lunar Crater Observation and Sensing Satellite in 2009. In addition to finding water, LCROSS also found a variety of other components that are typical of comets, indicating that at least some of the water may have traveled on asteroids. The authors of the new study discovered in their models to be stimulating volcanic activity on the near side of the Moon, and as a result of the impact. The South Pole-Aitken collision is one of the most important occurrences in lunar history, and how the Procellarum creep terrain developed is possibly the most important unanswered question in lunar science. These two ideas are combined in this piece, although as time passes, more evidence will be needed to support this notion. Whatever the case, perhaps the next time you find yourself admiring the Moon's majesty, you'll also give its hidden and uneven far side some thought. Thanks for watching another episode of Voyager. While you're still here, make sure to click the video on your screen for more mind-blowing videos about space.